it's interesting how the human mind and the brain works, right? It's kind of like a lot of times it doesn't even know it's in limitation. And most people don't know that they're in limitation, even with their desires and what they want to create or move into. Like, I want this. And even in their desire and wanting of what they claim as abundance, there's this level of limitation.
Welcome to the Systems for Success podcast, where we talk about how to effortlessly increase your productivity, amplify your entrepreneurial impact, and profitably turn your passion into your life's work. We've got eye-opening insights with a sprinkle of charisma and a mind set on domination, hosted by myself, Kevin Wathey. All right, and welcome to this episode of the Systems for Success podcast. My guest today is Miss Emily Rivera, the Angel Coach. She is an international leading expert in intuition. Might have to do this around 3, but let's keep it going. Business growth and impact, higher consciousness, and helping adults and children with heightened sensitivities and abilities. As a speaker, author, coach, and teacher, she eloquently blends the practical with the esoteric, offering clear and precise direction and actionable steps to help her clients tap into their power. She currently serves clients in over 130 countries and has been working with and helping celebrities, CEOs, thought leaders, influencers, and individuals of varying ages and backgrounds awaken to their own mastery, life purpose, creative spark, and intuitive awareness, so they can be of greater impact while also living a life of abundant flow and joyful fulfillment. That is one of the best bios I have ever read for anyone on the show. Emily, thank you so much, my friend, for being here. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. And I receive and appreciate the compliment. I'm excited. I have energy running through my body and energy moving, as you can hear in my voice. So this is going to be fun.
I'm stoked to dive on in, and there's a couple different avenues and a couple different streets I want to walk down with you, so to speak. But to begin with, you have a very interesting career and a very interesting approach to life. I know we've talked significantly off the air, but I want to get a little bit of the backstory of when did you know the Angel Coach, this path in life? When did you know that this was what you wanted to do, or that this chose you?
Thank you. Great question. I've been getting trained since I was a little girl. So how it was all going to play out, I never really understood until I got older. But since a little girl, I've been getting visited by beings and angels and manifestations of love that have been like really training me. And the first memory I have was when I was around 5-6 years old, and it was this beautiful Asian presence that was sitting with me, teaching me about the frailty of humanity, and how within that frailty there was also beautiful power that was contained within the soul. And during this memory, it was more of me understanding the role that I had to play in helping people remember by me remembering, and by me just knowing and understanding that I'm not just human. And I know it was probably given to me in a lot easier way to understand it as a 5-year-old. But that is my first memory. And I remember that this being had me hold what looked like cartilage. And we were just talking about it, just gives me the chills, but he would have me hold it, and he would tell me, like, he wanted me to really experience the frailty by me holding this thing. And sometimes it would break, but he would always go back to reminding me and showing me within the experience that, again, we're actually very powerful. And this training continued all my life. Middle school, high school, I've got a lot of memories, including, like, they would tell me, like, stand up straight, look people into their eyes, and they would actually help me to, like, the thoughts people were feeling and how I could help them. Even conversations like question everything. They would tell me question everything when I would hear people talk, or I would read stuff, not out of like you should challenge it, but more of like, stay open, right? Stay open so that you can actually see and perceive the truth. And I could identify what's the truth and what isn't, so I can let go. There we go with, I'm back. So it's been a journey that has been part of my whole life. Now, going into the Angel Coach, the company itself, I've been doing this for over a decade. And at that time, when I dove into doing this full time, I was told that it was time. It was time for me to step into doing this work. And it's been very divinely guided the whole way, including the Angel Coach. They audibly told me to call myself the Angel Coach and make that the business name as well. And that was, again, over a decade ago.
So a lot of knowing you and having conversations with you, a lot of what you do and a lot of the way that you approach your life now is quote unquote divinely guided, and you're willing and open and receptive to receiving so that you can then see, like, am I going right or am I going left, kind of thing.
Yes.
Was there a point in your life where you didn't listen to this divine guidance? And if so, what did your life look like in that time?
So I had many little moments in which I didn't listen. You know, I hear from people all the time, oh my gosh, this must be great. You've always must have been listening and following guidance since you get it all the time. And I'm like, no, I was actually that mischievous child a lot of times, even as an adult, you know, like, well, I want to do my own thing. Like, no, like I'm going to give this a try instead. And I am at a phase and a place in my life where I've been more intentional of not letting that side of me come out, because it has created delays. I've had experiences in which I've been told, well, if you choose that, right, if you were to lean into that and choose that, it will delay. And they would tell me timeline delays. Like one of them, and the most significant one was an 8-year delay, which I wouldn't change for anything, but it did create a delay. And they were very clear about that. And there's times even when I remember in high school sneaking out and divine intervention telling me not to do it, and me doing it and it being one of those things that I regretted, right? So it's like, it's guided me all along. And I know you're saying like so it's happened throughout my life, but it's also helped me to perfect my why I do need to listen and why I do need to trust and lean in, because there's a lot of opportunities that are being delivered in my path that I was either delaying, postponing, or requiring them to morph into something else that could have made things easier. So I'll say it like that. But with all that being said, my oldest daughter is special needs, fully disabled, feeding tube, 24-hour nursing, medically needs a lot of help. When she was born and she started having seizures, that was a time in my life where I felt like, and again, this is energy. This is energy. So they're interfering with the camera right now. So that was a time where I felt very confused, alone, and I didn't feel the guidance, even though it was still there. My mind, my brain, and it happens to all of us, it went into survival more in my situation and my life experience. And the listening, the trusting, the letting go, the flow of what was trying to guide me became very, very distant, and I couldn't hear it. And the gift of that is that it did also, the silence helped me to really crave what I was listening and feeling before. And it pretty much put me into a different place of it being my mission and remembering what I had known all along. And so, yes, that happened during that time. That was, I would say, the time.
So the silence almost acted as an amplification process for you. It was, and this happens a lot in life, and this is something that I see a lot in my life, is we have one thing and then it changes. I know we talked a bit about this before, but the change, like you can't see change until change happens. Like you have to change something in order to see the change. And the silence was that other side of the coin for you, which then allowed you to heighten and tap into further that which you wanted to. So essentially it was what some would perceive to be a negative that you've shifted into a positive experience.
Yes. Yes. And one thing that they're audibly telling me and just acknowledging, and by the way, I feel so much, I'm excited to talk. I get so much energy. So if it starts glitching, I'm preparing in case that happens. So one of the things that was the gift, right? The gift of that time for me is that I became very committed to being a student, so before, like, my experiences with hearing stuff, being shown where to go, I was shown where to go to college, literally everything was shown, and I would go with it, right? I would take the leap. And when that silence took over, it put me into a place where I became a student, and I learned to know and understand, like, how do I hear? How do I see more? How do I experience more? Which has been very pivotal for me as a teacher, as a coach, as a speaker, as a leader, to helping others do the same, right? So it's kind of like my training became the gift in helping others do the same, regardless of what they were going through, right? If I could do it through those circumstances, then anybody could do it. And I was being shown the tools, the steps to make that happen.
Do you believe that everyone has this gift or everyone has this intuition that they can tap into, or is it a select few people that have this gift?
Great question. And there's this whole conversation can take us down a long, interesting rabbit hole. But my hallucination is that everyone can have this. It just plays out and shows up very differently for everyone. I go back to the truth that we all have energy, our soul, and that there is everything around us that is energy and source, and whatever you choose to identify and call it. So regardless of who you are and what your history and past has been, it's like, that's who you are. And the question is, like, how is your path to recognizing it, communicating it, understanding it, and even apply it? It goes back to that idea of even love languages, right? And communication, like, we all have different ways of communicating. Like, we're all very unique, but we still go back to the same truth that we have this within us because it's who we are.
So essentially, it's I believe, all right, I believe that I have the same stance on this, that we're all exceptionally powerful, more powerful than we could possibly imagine. But incomfortability is limitation, because limitation is known and abundance is unknown. So for the vast majority of people, they limit themselves in a way to provide significance or control or certainty based on their trajectory in life, rather than being open and willing and receptive to the abundance that life can provide you if you're willing to open yourself to it. Are we kind of on the same wavelength there?
I feel like we are. I mean, we would probably use different languaging, but yes, we are. I think we're seeing it in similar ways. I think it's interesting how the human mind and the brain works, right? It's kind of like, a lot of times it doesn't even know it's in limitation, and most people don't know that they're in limitation, even with their desires and what they want to create or move into. Like, I want this, and even in their desire and wanting of what they claim as abundance, there's this level of limitation, right? Because it's only based on their history and what they think they know. So, which again, I think we're saying the same exact thing, just different languaging.
Absolutely. I saw a video the other day of Grant Cardone that I thought was really interesting. And when he first started his 10X company, he had initially said, okay, we're going to do 10 million. And then his wife was like, 10 million? No, I want you to be a billionaire. So he goes, 1 billion. And he goes, well, if we do 1, why can't we do 10? Because 1 was like this absurd number to him. And then 1 turned into 10. If we can do 10, why not 100? If not 100, like, every single number you put is arbitrary. Every single thing that you think is just some arbitrary thing based on your past life experience that you then put yourself into this container or this like glass box, because you're not allowing yourself to think bigger than you actually are. Because sure, you say it's impossible, but it's only impossible until someone proves it possible. And then it becomes possible for everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
So I know you work a lot with children as well. Mm-hmm. Walk me through what that process looks like, because I feel like there's a lot of children who, for the better part of their childhood, are tapped into this source, this energy, and this intuition, and allowing themselves to guide themselves based on that. And then I feel like there comes a point, and I can give you the reason why I feel like this, because of my own experience too. that there comes a point when they recognize that society is either judging them, or they recognize that someone else's judgments are being placed on top of who they should be. And then they cancel everything that they had known up to this point to fit this mold of what the world says you should be. So when approaching a child, or when approaching someone who would be considered gifted, what does that process look like?
So there's several things that you kind of like said that I feel I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. But before I answer that, are you okay if I just go rewind real quick based on what they're asking me?
Absolutely.
So one of the things when you were talking about the 10x and it's like there's some level, right? There's more that we can see, experience. And as you were talking, they were showing me that it's really dependent, and this is interesting, right? Dependent on what parts of the brain are lit up. And that's how they want me to explain it, right? So depending on where the neural system, or the way the pathways and the way the brain itself is functioning, can have people's ability or heighten their ability, to see more. So they're saying heighten the ability to see more. So it goes back into like, what work are you doing to wake up more of your mind and your brain, which in turn helps you become more limitless. It helps you to step more into greater possibilities, and not just in thought form, but in the knowing of what's possible, which triggers the brain, the subconscious, all aspects of you to work differently, right? And create differently and show up differently, which, I know I use Cardone as an example, which is a great example because it's kind of like even just that conversation he had with his wife and the whole collaboration of that, right? It's like there's different parts of the brain that are being lit up within him, which have him functioning and thinking in a different way. So part of what they're saying is that, or part of the gift in this conversation is like those that are listening, and even just ourselves, like what can you do to wake up more of the brain, more of your brain, more of the mind itself, so that you can recognize more of the ability within the limitless possibilities that are accessible to you.
I received that 100%. And I want to, before we go further, keep on this topic right here for a second. At what point does striving for more, always striving for more, in your opinion, at what point does that then become enough? Like, you can always go for more, but how you interpret it can then become enough. So where's the balance, or what would you consider the balance between more versus enough?
It's an interesting question because I think it's like I want to say a oxymoron kind of, but maybe that's not the right term for it. But that's what I want to say, even though I don't know if that's really the right term for it. But it's like that idea. It's like, it's a funny concept. Like, when is enough enough? Like, it's a funny concept. Like, if we are alive, we're destined for more. And not because the soul is saying it's not good enough, but because the soul owns and knows that we are in an evolutionary experience called life. And we are destined to continue to evolve in many different ways and in very different colors. And they're showing me a flower, right? Like each petal, unfolds perfectly. And it's like that idea that it's constantly an evolution. And it's interesting they're showing me a flower because the flower withers as well, but they're showing me a flower, which makes me think, thank you, they're saying the flower of life. So this is a little deeper conversation here. So the flower of life, the sacred geometry of the flower of life. It's kind of like that idea, ooh, and they're giving me chills with this. It's like, if you look at the flower of life and we were in the middle of it, right? It's like we are constantly in a state of evolution. And in the flower of life, it kind of goes and creates different circles, and it becomes part of different circles and different, it's like an evolutionary process. And life itself is asking us to evolve, to crave more, not because we are in lack or should in any way get, it's like, it's funny because they're saying humans sometimes can see it as an addiction, but it's just not being interpreted and understood and embraced properly, right? It's going more into the conversation that is our purpose. That's part of our destiny, to be in an evolutionary process. And it's going to look different for different people. But the problem, they're saying, what can happen is, like, as the flower if the evolution is taking place in only one area of the flower versus the holistic expansion, right? So if a person is craving more and evolving and seeking more, and they're doing it in a holistic way, that is a very, what I like to say, delicious, right? That's more of a delicious experience of the soul. And that's what the soul is asking us to do. So when is it ever enough? It's like one of those questions that it's never enough, not necessarily how we're asking it as a human, but on a soul level, there's always more. There's always more growth, not just in one area, but in a holistic way. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to share it based on how I trust that's answering the question.
Absolutely.
And going into this further, it's like they're saying that when we're evolving in a holistic way, there's something greater that's triggered along the way. Gratitude becomes part of the equation without even us trying to make gratitude part of the equation. It just happens holistically, right? So if we find ourselves feeling, and they're showing me, it's actually pretty funny, they're showing me the Lord of the Rings. The guy is like, the ring, that creature. It's like, and they're being funny with that idea that we can become that creature when we focus on one thing and are seeking of more, right? Like the ring, or like, give me that, it's like he's aiming for the ring. But so when we focus our energy, our attention, our emotions to gaining one thing and craving more of one thing, that's when we become these creatures, right? Where we're debilitated, we don't feel fulfilled, even though there's more coming to us. But when we enter again, once again, going back to the real intention of the soul, it's like the soul craves a holistic evolution, and the holistic evolution, more is always a beautiful thing.
I absolutely love that. And you answered it very succinctly. And I believe the question that is there an enough is the wrong question to be asking, because you're either growing or you're dying. There's no stagnation. So you're always growing and striving for more. But the key piece is finding gratitude, like you had said, in the present. Because if you can't enjoy the process of achieving more, then what's the point of striving for more in the first place? Because if you can't enjoy what is now, there's no point in attaining more, because what you're working to attain is always outside of yourself, therefore putting you in a state of scarcity or a state of lack, rather than recognizing the abundance that is now and saying, yeah, I'm this is enough, but I'm always wanting to grow, because that's part of, like you said, the evolutionary cycle. I love that so much.
Yeah. And it's interesting because one thing I know you're getting, and it's being received, but because you're repeating it, I have to repeat it. And what they're saying is that it's like, I don't know why they're saying the word involuntary, the difference between involuntary and voluntary. And I'm not quite sure what they mean by that. But again, they're going back into the point of what they're wanting me to just re-say is that the thing that's so amazing, that if we authentically show up, they're literally showing me somebody walking up to stage, right? Life. If we show up in life and we're like, I am holistically in evolution, holistically craving more, holistically aiming for more, holistically feeding more, the natural organic process that occurs without us saying, I have to focus more on gratitude, is that holistically gratitude takes over, right? And I have to say, I've had that experience where it's like, I'm not going around like, oh, I'm grateful for this and I need to make sure I'm like, no, it like happens. Like I'm driving and I go into euphoria and I'm like, in love with the moment, in love with what I'm seeing, in love with how I'm feeling. And I'm just literally blissed out in euphoria. It happens when I'm playing sometimes with my kids. It happens when I'm getting ready for work. It's like, I'm not seeking it. It finds me, right? It finds me. And it goes back to that whole idea of like a holistic evolution opens you up to being found versus you feeling you have to continually seek. And again, a paradox is that if you are in a holistic evolution, is that you are seeking, But what they're trying to say is that gratitude doesn't become something you have to create, aim for, or seek. It finds you. It just finds you.
I love that. Absolutely, absolutely love that. It's, I mean, then it's the involuntary versus voluntary. That's something that's involuntary. It happens authentically, organically, holistically,
Mm-hmm.
without the only effort on your end is a surrender.
Yes. Which is the gift of synchronicity.
Exactly.
Oh.
So let's now tiptoe and connect the dots on the second part of that question. I'm glad we dove deeper there because that's fantastic and very eloquently put. So thank you very much for that. So working with children, and the reason I'm curious about this is because I taught acting for teens, children and teens for a long time. And my experience was that at this like 13, 14-year-old age range, they would go away for the summer and they would come back and they would be changed. They would be different because they realized that who they were, like they were authentically, holistically themselves leading up to it. And then they had this like awakening where society is imprinting on them in some way. So what does your process look like in terms of working with children who would be considered gifted?
So what's the process? There's so many ways to answer that. But what I will go back to is, again, going and trusting what they're audibly saying, is that one of the biggest fallacies in human teaching, is how they want me to say, is that the idea of rules and the idea of expectations that are not based out of genuine desire, but more of like, this is what you need and should do to fit in, right? So it's not necessarily based on like, this is actually authentically what's right and best. It's more of like, either you fit in or you stand out. And standing out is a beautiful thing. But when you're at a vulnerable stage and you're a child, and even just especially teens with hormones and all that, it's like standing out is more, feels like death at times, right? So they're saying an eloquent delivery. And I'm like, what is about to be said? Eloquent delivery. My suggestion for those that work with kids or even parents, I feel like this is what they're going to lean into. It's like going back again, doing the work themselves. So one thing that I love working with parents and like teaching with the kids, it's like, it's not necessarily about what you do with your child, but what are you doing with yourself? Our children learn beyond just our words. It's not about what we're telling them, even though, yes, some things come through that way. It's about who we are being and how we're showing up and the work we're doing for ourselves. Because I'm grateful. My daughter is a great example, and I have not been perfect. I have not. But she's a woman who's very confident. She's beautiful. She's smart. And yes, she has her moments. So it's not that she's perfect either, but I recognize that the level of comfort with who she is and her confidence and her success, even at school, friendships, being popular, being the president, like just going for what she wants, is not because I've been telling her, but I've been showing her, right? I've been that example. And the best thing that I think anybody can do when you have a child, even if you're a teacher, is like, what work are you doing with yourself to be that embodiment? Because again, they receive and sense way more from you than what you're telling them, especially the children that I know I'm very passionate in helping, the sensitive and intuitive children. They experience life in a different way. And I was watching a movie last night. We were watching a movie last night, Lucy. I don't know if you've seen that movie. And in the movie, they were reminding me, because they've told me this many times, but it was a perfect moment to be reminded, because one thing that I'm shown is that a lot of these children, especially over the last decade, and I know I've shared that with you, Kevin, you're like one of these children now as an adult. It's like there's areas in the brain that are very awake and very alive, and how they experience themselves, the world, and matter as it surrounds them. And they experience it a little more intensely, as you see in the movie Lucy, right? It's like there's parts of the brains that are just more awake. So their experience with life is very different. The question is, as parents, as adults, as teachers, like, how do we keep those areas of the brain awake and alive without having them feel that they need to shut it off to survive, right? To move through life where it feels safe. And the best way to do that is offer them tools that can help them see that that is their gift, that is their power. And I know that's what I've been experiencing since a little girl, right? These beings, these angels have been teaching me that that is my power. That's my superpower. So there was no need for my brain to shut certain areas that have given me the ability to see a lot of things and hear things and move things. What I feel that I can move things in this reality. I'm not like powerful. I'm not saying that, but I've seen the response of life. You know, I can shapeshift as much as I can shapeshift my reality, depending on what's unfolding. And part of the gift is that, again, these beings taught me to keep those parts of my brain alive, awake. And they're saying the word sensitive, right? So even going back to that, the gift of being sensitive. And our children are sensitive with their emotions, with how they see the world, their awe, their playfulness. And a lot of times as adults, we have these rules, like it's not a good time to be loud. It's not a good time to play. It's not a good time to be awake. It's not a good time to eat that or not. It's like there's so many rules and expectations that are based on society's expectations, but also what we as adults feel like this is how we maintain life. This is how we maintain surviving versus thriving. And they're saying the word thriving. So the question is like, again, not question, but as adults, parents, those that are listening to have children, it's like, how can you reinforce thriving for your child versus surviving, right? So how can you encourage thriving where those parts of their emotions get seen, heard, and expressed? Thank you. You're saying the word communication. Part of our role is to teach our children new ways of communication and their moving energy, right? Communication with our languaging, communication with how they perceive stuff, communication with trusting whatever comes up within them and let that be the true filter versus the external being the filter of what should be felt, said, or experienced. That was very interesting. I'm going to have to replay that too and listen to that.
I love that. Allowing their authentic experience to be what guides them.
Yes.
Rather than a societally conditioned or imposed belief of what things should be, because that's what is should. Should it doesn't exist. It's someone else's belief being imposed on someone that has no experience of that belief before this moment.
Yes. I'm being shown a funny memory, so I'll share this memory because it was adorable. I was doing something with my son and I said, oh my gosh, I have to do this and I have to do that. And he goes, do you really have to? Do you have to do that? Or are you choosing to do that? And I'm like, that's a great point. I don't have to do it. It's like, I'm choosing to do it, right? I get to choose to do it. So it's cute because I'm grateful that between his dad and I, we've been very intentional to feed that and see that and nourish that and nurture that. But another memory too that's funny, it's like I'm very intentional in not telling my son like this is good or bad. I like to use the word interesting, which I'm sure you heard me use it, Kevin. I say interesting. Well, that's interesting. And I've trained myself to not give it like a color. When I say color, it's emotion. It's not good or bad. It's not, but I do get excited. So I do excitement a lot and delicious. So delicious is a word for me that I use often. But I try to be very mindful in saying the word interesting, right? Because automatically our brain, based on our history and our past and what we've gone through, whenever we identify or link an emotion to something, it literally is a train wreck, right? It brings everything else that's been part of our past that is connected with that emotion, even though our human mind may not perceive it. So it can compound what unfolds. It can compound the story. It can compound, the narrative, the lies that take place. So when our children are that young, if we're able to be more mindful and not labeling the experience and just being attentive to it just being an experience, they're saying we can crack the code, which I love that, right? We can crack the code in helping our children stay very unattached, right? Unattached into labeling not just themselves, but their emotions, their experiences, other people, right? And they just become more aware of like what is coming up versus what it's being labeled.
Language is such an important piece in that, and it's been something that's been very prevalent on my mind for a while, but even more so in the past couple of months or so. And like we always hear and see the things that we want to change ourselves and other people. And it was an interesting conversation I had with one of my coaches, that I was picking up on another conversation, this person's language where it was should, need, and have to. And then after I explained it, we continued the conversation. And then the coach paused me like 10 minutes later and said, "Do you realize that you've said you have to do this thing like 15 times now in the conversation?" And I always thought that I'd never use those words, and I didn't consciously, and consciously I didn't, unconsciously I was, but I recognize them in other people rather than in myself first, because they're a mirror to myself. So we did this exercise where I basically closed my eyes, sat back, and she basically read off sentences. I have to do this. I need to do this. I should do this. And to rate them in terms of how they feel in my body on a scale of one being very constrictive to 10 being exceptionally freeing. And all of the things that were shoulds and haves and needs were all like a 1 to a 3. Like I felt myself tighten because I had to do this thing. I should do this today. I must do this right now. And it was very constrictive. And then we went through the conversation and offered a reframe of I want to, I choose to, I get to, which are ways to reframe those words. I don't have to do this. I choose to do this. I don't need to do this. I get to do this. This isn't a must today, although it may be a must. Why must I accomplish this? It's a great way to provide guidance to you, but you recognize then it's a choice. And by consciously having that conversation with myself, I've been able to rewrite and rethink a lot of the goals that I have in my life in a way that I can embody gratitude in the moment rather than having a lack until I accomplish them. Because I choose to, I get to, and I want to pursue them the way that I do.
Yes.
So the fact that you bring up language there and the way that ties in, and that's been on the forefront of my mind for quite some time, is auspiciously delicious.
Auspiciously delicious. It's funny, they're moving so much energy for those who are watching me for the first time, and even Kevin, I think you already know. So I'm like fidgety, not because I'm trying to, like literally the energy is moving through my body, which usually what happens is that first, Kevin, let's celebrate. When energy is moving the way it's moving is that there's a lot of ahas happening for people, and energy's moving, like energy's moving out. So, one thing, I actually had this conversation with a client the other day, is that, and again, the neural pathways, like he's like, you have, and again, that's energy with the camera, which is funny to me. He's like, I feel different. It's like, I even, like things that literally a day before he was thinking and a week before that we were coaching on weren't even in the table anymore, right? It was like gone. And he's like, what, like what's going on? And they lit up his brain, and they were showing me like the changes that took place in the brain. And they're showing me that vision, like that idea that even in conversations like this, even 10-minute conversations can create very drastic changes, because what happens, and in a bigger scheme of things, like if you were to look down on a soul level and be like, oh, wow, I'm seeing this change happen. So as I'm feeling the energy moving in my body, there's changes that are happening for some of you that are not intellectual, right? So when there's this, and I like to call it portals. we have portals in our day and within our life and within our moments. And these portals open up. There's an opening that takes place. And in that opening, your soul, the greater you, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, it's as if you are giving permission for something else to speak, for something else to express itself, for something else to take over in a very honoring way to lead you forward. So even the conversation we're having, when I'm saying I'm fidgety and you see me, like I do the shivers, I can't control them. The shivers usually is like the energy's is good, it's high. But when you see me fidgeting, it's because there's energy moving in body that's making me a little uncomfortable. But usually what happens is that I'm sensing that there's things that have been uncomfortable or stagnant or stuck that are moving out for people. So the reason I'm bringing this into the conversation is like right now there's things moving for several people, including Kevin and I, right? Including Kevin and I. And it's kind of like we're opening up these mini portals that are allowing for something greater to take place, which to me is always, always magically, auspiciously delicious and exciting, right? Because it's kind of like who we were before this conversation can no longer be. And I'm not saying that life is going to drastically change. I'm not saying that. But you've shifted, even if it's a millimeter, right? Even by a millimeter, it's a shift enough for you to be a different person. And again, I love that they're wanting me to say this because like we can get very caught up in our stories. And I'm sure, Kevin, you hear this all the time. Well, this is just how I am. This is how I like to do things. This is how I show up. And it might have its positive qualities, right? Like even just going into Grant Cardone, let's go into Cardone. Like I always 10X, right? Even that idea of the identity within any identity has its limitations, right? So the fact that any part of you shifted, even if it's just a millimeter, you can own and give yourself permission that you are a new man or a new woman because you're definitely not the same person you were 10 minutes ago. Which opens us up. It opens us up to even more of the gift of evolution and the process of receiving more.
Well, it's the little shifts that compounded are what shape our lives and shape who we are. And there's this belief, my hallucination maybe, that there's this belief that it needs to be this massive breakthrough, this crazy aha moment. It's got to be the sky is part and a lightning bolt comes down and strikes you. But when you actually break down your day to day, like the hour you spend at breakfast with your loved ones, that happens every single day, 7 days a week, 7 hours a week. That compounded then becomes that relationship, not this massive aha one-time holiday or this vacation. And people think that their life is going to be sipping pina coladas on a beach in Hawaii. But the actual work in life is the little things that you do every single day and how you show up. There was a fantastic, I don't know if it was Instagram or TikTok or what it was, but it was Will Smith. And I think it was one of his interviews that he did for his new book. Haven't read it yet, so no spoilers if you have. And I'm going to listen to it because he narrates it and that'll be epic. Mm-hmm. He was talking about his relationship with his father and how it wasn't the greatest relationship up until his father got sick. And when his father got sick, he gave him 3 months to live. And he said, you know what? I'm going to regret it. If I don't, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to put all the cards on the table. And after that conversation, there was this element of freedom that pervaded their interactions together. And in doing so, it's because their time then became scarce because there was a date on it that now this is the expiration date as told by Western medicine. Well, his father lived to the 3 months and then lived I believe another 6 months after that date. But he said the blessing in all of this was that because of that, every single time following that conversation, we said goodbye. It was a thorough goodbye because they knew it could be the last time. Mm-hmm. But then the lesson there is that that's true for every interaction you have in your life. This could be the last time we ever speak. Mm-hmm. And that's the mentality I don't want to say should, but that's the mentality. Funny, the camera there too.
Yeah.
The mentality that when you entertain life from this place of abundance and awareness and consciousness, that if you treat everything as if it has the option to be your last, you're going to live a much fuller experience and enjoy your life on a much, much deeper level. And I believe everything we've talked about today in a way is tied to that, because then you become present to the authentic experience. And when you're present to the authentic experience, it's no longer conditioned or colored or have anything externally being placed on it, because you recognize that no matter what happens, this could be the last time. And when you recognize that, things become scarce. And when things become scarce, they become valuable. And the value we place on something is totally from our own mind and nothing outside of us.
Yes. It's auspicious that you're talking about this. So that's why my camera went off. So first of all, my dad passed in 2019. So as you started talking about like it being like savoring the day, and I know you said it in your own language, but my dad touched my head and then I literally felt touching all over me. And that's when the camera went off. Interesting enough, not yesterday, day before yesterday, I walked into my garage to throw away the garbage, and a voice said, "What would you do different if today was your last day?" 2 days ago. And I heard it again, and then I heard it again yesterday. And that song from Nickelback, like, if today was your last day, right? It's like how his friend reminded him, like, live life, right? And auspiciously, I'm literally going to do it live on this because it's been the message the last 2 days. So I love that you're bringing the conversation here. One thing I have to say, unfortunately, when I was young, I had a lot of people pass. And even though I could still see them in spirit and hear them, and it created this thing within me where I was like, I have to savor. Like, this could be the last time I see my dad. This could be the last time I see my brother. This is the last time I could see my mom. And I remember, like, anytime I would have to say goodbye, I would feel this emotion of weight and sadness, it wasn't good. It didn't feel good, but it had me show up, right? It like, I was committed to making sure they knew that I love them, and it was making me to show up the best that I could. Literally, this is an emotion that I had going all the way up into high school, and it was sometimes debilitating, even in college. So it has its positives, and I'm going to say it's weight, because I think if we can, it's a gift to do that, and there's a part of us that can show up better. But it goes, part of the conversation, I think they're showing me to go into the memory of that, is that for those that are healthy, and I'm trusting everybody listening to us are healthy, but for those that aren't healthy, it's like going into the conversation, into the day, like, this could be my last day, can actually put people in the wrong direction. And then for people that are healthy, it can put them in the right direction, right? Or favorable direction. And this is interesting how life plays in different ways, right? Because the unhealthy way is that people can go into fear, right? And fear can drive people to do things in a different way, but also savor the moment in a different way. The invitation about, like, what if this is your last day? It's not just about doing your best and showing up your best, but actually savoring at your best. So it's not just about how you show up for other people and being your best for other people, because it could be your last day, because out of like, oh, it's a responsibility. But more of like, how do I savor the day? Because ultimately, if you're savoring the day, savoring yourself, savoring the other person the way that you are capable of, everyone wins, right? There's no fear guiding the experience. There's no fear infiltrating the gift. So it's perfect. And I'm grateful that we're having this conversation, because that apparently is an important thing right now collectively. Or at least based on how they show me stuff, which is why I'm actually going to do a live and talking about this, because collectively there's movement or something unfolding or taking place or about to take place in our souls in a deeper way. That's what I'm saying. It's auspicious you're bringing this, but it isn't, because I see you as being intuitive. It just shows up differently for you. It's a perfect message Because right now, collectively, everybody's souls, it's the song that's being sung. That's the song that's being sung in our collective right now. Savor the day. Savor yourself. Savor who you're with. Savor the moment. Because it could be the last. So not out of fear, but out of like, wow, I can make this the best moment ever. And then seeing the gift and what it can actually lead us into and free us. Thank you. What it can actually free us into.
There's a fantastic quote, I believe, by Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, that says, if this was my second time living today, what would I do differently? And it's approaching that rather than being a positive or negative, fear-based or abundance-based. It's that if I was living this day again, what would I change? And when you then, in my interpretation, when you then approach your life from that way, when you approach your life from let's be intentional about all of the decisions that I am making, because if this was the second day, I would have done this or do this. Now, every action, decision, choice you make is with purpose, is with passion, is with intention, and then is uniquely authentic to you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that.
So I want to be mindful of your time. So I have one final question for you, Emily, and that is hypothetically speaking, that the end is near, your last day is approaching, and on your very last day on this planet, in this physical experience that you're having now, you get to say one final sentence. What would that sentence be?
Interesting enough, you cut off. Can you say the last part?
So the end is near. You have one final day or one final moment. And in that moment, you have the opportunity to say one sentence, a sentence that you'll be remembered for. And it's a sentence that brings everything that you know in this life to be true into one eloquent, succinct sentence. What would that sentence be?
Okay. No pressure at all, Kevin. One sentence I get remembered by? Wowza. Okay, here we go. You are not doing this alone. This life, this journey, that's part of the bigger message. You're not doing it alone. We're doing it together. We're holding each other's hands, guiding each other home. And we're evolving together. And we're seen and loved way more than we've been told. And outside just even the physical us that's here, there's this orchestration of love and light that has our back, literally speaking and guiding us the whole way home.
What a magnificent place to end this, bookend this conversation. Emily, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I hope you have I trust you will have an outstanding rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. Same to you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Systems for Success podcast, where we talk about how to effortlessly increase your productivity, amplify your entrepreneurial impact, and profitably turn your passion into your life's work. To join our free group for entrepreneurs, go to s4spod.com/group, or to receive our latest online client acquisition report, go to s4spod.com/report, and have a fantastic rest of your day. See ya.